Well, the House of Commons has risen for its summer break. The early break comes as the last 2 weeks of the spring session were dominated by a parliamentary report that, among other things, alleged that some MPs had wittingly or semi-wittingly participated in foreign interference. Both NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and Green Party leader Elizabeth May have read the full top secret report, and here to talk about her thoughts and what she thinks needs to be improved, Green Party leader Elizabeth May joins me now. Ms. May, thanks so much for taking the time for Political Debrief.
Well, thanks, Josh. It's good to be with you.
So before we jump into the report, can you maybe just give us your assessment in general um, of Canada's ability to respond to foreign interference, or even what is foreign interference? Like, what are we defining as foreign interference?
Those are excellent questions because, the act that we just passed in Parliament in quite, I think, maybe even record time to respond to foreign interference, Bill C-70, deals with, for the first time, Canada establishing a foreign influence or foreign interference registry in the same way that we have a lobbyist registry, but even there we don't define foreign interference. For people watching this podcast, this is the publicly available version of the report. If you're interested in this kind of area, please get hold of the public document. Anyone can read it. It's the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians special report on foreign interference. It's a real eye opener. This is the publicly accessible version. And at various points throughout it, it will say these sentences here, a paragraph here have been redacted for concerns for reputation or confidentiality or whatever. So what I got to read, because I have top secret security clearance, as by the way, as a result of the inquiry that happened last spring under the leadership of former Governor General David Johnston. He had the title of Special Rapporteur on Foreign Interference. And you're nodding, Josh. You remember what happened, and David Johnston left that position, and it was replaced with a commission of inquiry under a judge, Madam Justice Og, and her committee work. Her inquiry, which is at a different level of investigation, is continuing. Nevertheless, Mr. Johnston recommended that leaders of parties in Parliament all obtain top secret security clearance and then be allowed to read what he had read in order to come to the conclusions to which he came. This whole thing was sparked, by the way, by some people or individuals within CSIS deciding to take confidential documents and leak them directly to Bob Fife at the Globe and Mail. For myself, I agree with David Johnston. That is a violation of the Official Secrets Act, and people within CSIS who did that should be charged. On the other hand, there's also no question that we are more awake and alert to the threat to Canada's democracy from foreign actors, as in other governments interfering. So, what does it look like? I'll give you a real life example that isn't confidential at all. Back in 1983, somebody that your generation you'll need to go to Wikipedia and look it up because you don't know me. Does the name Karl Heinz Schreiber ring a bell? If you look up Karl Heinz Schreiber, you find that back in 1983, as a European operative representing right-wing governments or interests in Germany and elsewhere, brought money to Canada and paid for buses to bring delegates to the Progressive Conservative Leadership Convention in Ottawa in 1983 to back Brian Mulroney and defeat Joe Clark. Long time ago, but it's a reality. It happened. It was ended up being exposed by CBC's The Fifth Estate and an author named Stevie Cameron, who pulled back a lot of information, exposed it about the Mulroney era. Look, it happened in 1983 in a leadership race then. And if you read this public document here, you'll find that there was foreign interference, or at least there's significant intelligence that they were prepared to make public and put in the public version of the document that there was foreign interference in the leadership race that Pierre Poilievre won. So it's a current concern. A lot of the concerns around foreign interference of where foreign governments can impact Canadian politics is often within internal procedures of political parties, like nomination races and leadership races. That's just two examples to try to answer your question without taking hours and hours.
No, that's totally fair, and I appreciate it. And we'll jump back to that in a sec. I just want to talk about the NSICOP report quickly and
Mhm.
maybe just get through really quick some quick points of clarification from a couple of your press conferences. First thing, really quickly, on page 26 of the
Mhm.
report, this is probably the most concerning allegation that's getting a lot of attention, where reading directly from the report here.
Mhm.
Quote, the committee notes a particularly concerning case of a then member of parliament maintaining a relationship with a foreign intelligence officer. The member of parliament sought to arrange a meeting in a foreign state with a senior intelligence official and also proactively provided the officer with information provided in confidence. So that's what we have in the publicly available report.
That's right.
In the unredacted top secret report, is there a name or does it just say former member of parliament?
Okay, what can I talk about and what can I not talk about? I am under the Official Secrets Act. So what's in the report publicly versus what was redacted. What's important to know is that not only is this a single bad example, this is the only example of a parliamentarian proactively acting against Canadian interests in the interests of a foreign government. There's more information in the unredacted version, but what's critical is what's in the public version. I don't think we need more than what's in the public version to know this is a former member of parliament, currently not sitting in the House of Commons. I've also seen it reported, by the way, Josh, somehow or other it was reported that I had said that this former MP had acted in the interest of the People's Republic of China. I never said that because I don't mention the name of a country. The name of the country is in the unredacted version, and I haven't attributed this particular example of foreign interference to any particular country, and I won't because that part remains in a confidential, top secret situation. Some people, I know I've been asked by a lot of other journalists, why can't the whole report be made public? Is there really a concern for national security in sharing more with the public? So, as a hypothetical, and I'm not saying it applies to this particular case, but just to say, information that has been redacted and kept secret, largely, and I'll put forward a hypothetical. If the source of the intelligence to Canadian operatives is a valuable intelligence resource, this is back to like this is spy movie stuff, right? Okay, pretend it's a spy movie, and you've got a really good intelligence operative who's operating in another country, and they'd be in danger if that country government knew they were dishing dirt directly to Canadian intelligence operatives. So you don't want to give even enough context that another country could twig and say, well, Sam seemed like such a nice guy, but he's the only one who could have known blah, blah, blah. And suddenly, blah, blah, blah has been talked about in Canada. So I'm really careful about what I say. So I will very carefully say to you and to your audience that the example on page 26 is the only example of any MP cited in the unredacted report, past or present, who has knowingly sought to sell out our country to benefit another country. The others fall in that category that's CSIS language, semi-witting, unwitting, maybe witting, but it gets into a murkier area. This isn't murky. And that's why I've called for an investigation of this particular example. And if the intelligence on which this information is based holds up to the extent that you could take it to court, whoever this former MP is should be prosecuted.
Whose responsibility do you think it should be to name this person? Is it the RCMP? Is it the government? Is it CSIS? Who is it?
I think rather than focusing on finding people and naming names, it's far more important that we pull together as parliamentarians and in lockstep with each other take the decisions about how do we deal with particular people within Canadian political life. By the way, there's also people elected or seeking office at other levels of government. where it's really critical that we examine foreign interference at provincial legislatures and municipally. Just saying that, set that aside. The more we are obsessed and allow ourselves to kind of chase our tails around, is there somebody who's currently serving in Parliament? Name names. Let's pull together first so whose responsibility is it? Us, elected parliamentarians, particularly leaders of political parties. So Mr. Poiliev, Mr. Singh, Mr. Blanchet, myself, and Justin Trudeau should be sitting down with all the members of the committee, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. Every single one of them has top secret security clearance. MPs and senators, MPs from the Bloc, the Conservatives, the Liberals, and the NDP. No Greens, unfortunately, but that's the group. They have top secret security clearance. They've done amazing work. They've read 33,000 pages of intelligence information to distill it into a report that's public. That's really, this public report tells a lot of the story that needs to be told. And what do we do about it? We ought to pull together and clean up our act. This report identifies specific soft spots and vulnerabilities in our democracy. A number of them, as I've mentioned, are in internal political party rules. So why don't we all get together and clean up our act on those particular places of vulnerability and make sure every party has strict rules about who gets to vote in a nomination race, how leadership races are run, etc.
So I guess let's go to that because we do have an election that has to happen by the end of next year. And I'm curious what your opinion is on some measures that are critical to be implemented before the next election to protect the security and transparency and fairness of our elections. Um, and I guess once you go through those, how many of them can you implement as the leader of a party?
Okay, first of all, the most important thing to do right now is to recognize that the threat of foreign interference and foreign actors who might want to disrupt our democracy are I'm sure enormously gratified if we act in a typical stupid and partisan fashion and point fingers at each other and let faith in our democracy unravel. Canadian public has a right to deserve and expect of our institutions that democracy is protected. So, the single most important thing that we all must do, regardless of political stripe, before the 2025 election is make sure that Canadian citizens have confidence in the process and will get out and vote. High voter turnout delivers better governments. Low voter turnout is a real threat to democracy. So we have to clean up our own act. That's why I voted against kicking it over to Madam Justice Hogue and the commission she's already heading. Not that I don't think Madam Justice Hogue would do a great job and will do because the vote carried and it's been kicked over to her. But really, that's months away. Her report has to be done by the end of December. I think every day that goes by with Canadians wondering, what? Somebody thinks there might be traitors in Parliament. Every day that goes by with those questions hanging over us, that cloud hanging over us, is a bad day. And all of us, regardless of party stripe. So you ask what we can do as party leaders, set aside partisanship and work together. Job one. And two, make sure, for instance, I'd like to see all party leaders agree that nobody can vote in a nomination contest if they're not entitled to vote on the ballot on election day. In other words, a Canadian citizen who lives in the district electing that candidate, that MP. That's identified in a couple reports as a critical weakness. You know, I'm not going to, I mean, our rules on this, I think we're already in good shape as Greens, but the minute I say that, I'm aware that it might sound like I'm saying other parties aren't so good. I'm trying to keep away from partisanship and say there's steps we can all take, and it's better for public confidence in our democracy. It's also better for giving the old heave ho to foreign actors who think they can interfere in our democracy if we do it together and fast to shore up the weaknesses and vulnerabilities in our systems. Let's just be clear here before we get into before we buy into a scenario where you can't trust existing members of parliament who are currently serving. Let's just set that aside. I've read the unredacted report. The full information, at least as analyzed by a group of members of parliament and senators who've done yeoman service to this country. They're really unsung heroes because they've taken an oath of secrecy. To serve on this committee doesn't get you on the front pages. To pretend you know what you're talking about and start cross-questioning and saying, where's the list of names of people? That's a completely overblown preoccupation. Let's focus, keep our eye on the ball. And what we want to focus on is how do we protect Canadian democracy from foreign interference? So what the overblown part was, let's find these names, tar and feather them. Let's get out the torches and if there's no names of any currently sitting MPs who have betrayed their country, set that aside as a preoccupation and focus where we should on setting partisanship to the side, working together to ensure that Canadians have confidence, that we know that our democracy is robust, and yes, take it seriously. We know for sure that a number of other governments around the world are targeting Canadian democracy at multiple levels, municipal, provincial, federal. All political parties are targets. That doesn't mean that all political parties are in any way participants. It just means eyes open, pay attention. How do we better protect our democracy and ensure that Canadian citizens have confidence that it matters to get out and vote?
All right, Elizabeth May, thanks so much for taking time for Political Debrief this morning.
May I say, Josh, the group that needs to vote the most is the group with the most at stake. And I'm 70. You're not. Young people are the ones who have the most skin in the game. And for God's sake, get out and vote and don't leave your future up to people my age and older, okay?
And that's it for this episode of Political Debrief. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in reading the report or seeing some of the media coverage and interviews about this important topic, I would invite you to check out the links down below. As well, consider subscribing on YouTube or Apple Podcasts to get notified next time I post an episode. That's all from me for now. See you next time.